Hey there and welcome to my channel. It's me, and today we re-off to the sunny coast of Greece, where from beach to seabed, carbon dating shows humans lived where modern boats now sail. All along the Greek islands and coast, the sparkling Aegean Sea separates Greece from the countries of Turkey, some 600 kilometers to the east. But did you know that 9,000 years ago, this was not an option for people looking to travel? That's right. 9,000 years ago, there were no ferries crisscrossing the Aegean Sea. If you wanted to get from the Greek island of Quays to Lesbos, you had to get in your boat and just hope for the best. Not exactly the relaxing getaway you may have planned, but it turns out those ancient mariners did manage to make the crossing. And not only that, they made it frequently enough for us to uncover evidence of their travels all these years later. As you'll see, however, most of these trips probably weren't taken for pleasure. Instead, these seafarers were likely working, traveling between islands to gather raw materials that weren't available where they lived. The first piece of evidence comes from the small Greek island of Chios. It's home to about 83,000 people, and famous for its mastic trees. These trees are pretty unique. They only grow on the island of Chios and some other Greek islands, and they have a special resin that oozes out of their bark. It's a thick, milky substance called mastic. You can walk around the streets of Chios town and see these trees growing in little squares and window boxes. Back in the day, though, these trees were more than a quirky local feature. Instead, they were extremely valuable. Mastic was used by ancient civilizations to treat stomach aches, sore throats, and even as an antiseptic. In fact, it was so prized that ancient Rome put a monopoly on the production of mastic on the island of Chios. The Romans controlled the collection of the resin, making sure that no one else could take advantage of these special trees. And with this monopoly came wealth. The residents of Chios were much better off than others, because they had something that everyone else wanted. But how does this connect to the neighboring islands? Well, recent research suggests that back in the Neolithic age, people sailed over from Lesbos to Chios, specifically to collect the resin from the mastic trees. Archaeologists found microscopic traces of mastic in ceramic vessels, dating back to the Neolithic period. These ceramics were found at settlements on the islands of Lesbos and Samos, neither of which has any mastic trees. This tells us that people from these islands went to Chios to gather the resin. It's probably trading something they had in abundance for the highly sought-after mastic. But we don't know much more than that. Unfortunately, the archaeological record is patchy when it comes to seafaring. We rarely find things like shipwrecks or docks from this time period, so piecing together how people traversed the Aegean back in the Neolithic age is tricky. Still, researchers are uncovering more clues. One of the most promising places to find ancient shipwrecks is in caves. Caves provided shelter from wind and waves, so it makes sense that sailors would want to dock in them. And in 2017, archaeologists found evidence of prehistoric boat use at a cave on the Greek island of Folegandros. The cave is located on the northwest side of the island and contains evidence of human occupation going back thousands of years. Researchers knew this already, but what they didn't know was the extent of maritime activity taking place here. Inside the cave, the team discovered wood from 2 boats. The wood had been chopped up and used to build houses in the Neolithic settlement located near the cave. Radiocarbon dating showed that the wood came from 2 boats that were used around 6,750 years ago. These boats weren't large enough to carry passengers or trade goods. Instead, they were probably used to transport building materials from other islands. Think about it. It makes more economic sense to transport building materials across the sea than it does to transport people. People can just walk. However, this also suggests that the islanders needed building materials from other islands. Maybe their homes were made out of sun-dried mud bricks that needed extra support, or maybe they needed stone for foundations. Whatever the case, this site tells us that boat travel was commonplace 9,000 years ago. Mariners were regularly transporting goods around the islands, sustaining their way of life. There is more evidence to suggest that people were traveling to and from the Greek islands during the Neolithic age, including a strange circular structure known as a tholos tomb. This type of tomb is iconic of the Mycenaean civilization, a Bronze Age culture that lived in Greece from around 1600 BC to 1100 BC. However, this particular tomb dates back to around 5,000 years ago, well before the Mycenaeans took over. The tomb is located on the island of Paros, but it isn't just any old tomb. It was built within a cave and lined with white stones. The entrance to the tomb is shaped like a beehive, which is also a characteristic feature of Mycenaean architecture. But again, this tomb dates back 4,000 years before the Mycenaeans ever showed up. How do we know that it's this ancient? Well, inside the tomb, archaeologists found an old marble altar that dates back to around 5,000 years ago. At first glance, this might seem pretty random. Why would anyone put an altar in a tomb? Well, it turns out that the Mycenaeans did this quite often, built altars in their tombs to honor the dead. But the difference here is that this altar predates the Mycenaean civilization by thousands of years. Why did the Neolithic people who buried their dead in this tomb build an altar in the shape of a beehive? What was their culture like? Unfortunately, we don't have answers to these questions. But what we do know is that people were traveling from other islands to bury their dead here. Maybe the people of Paros were honored to receive visitors who traveled across the Aegean to lay their loved ones to rest in such a strange and wonderful place. But what about after the Neolithic age? Did people continue traveling around the islands? Well, yes, but unfortunately, natural disasters may have gotten in the way. On the island of Melos, researchers uncovered evidence of a devastating tsunami that hit the island about 3,600 years ago. The tsunami arrived sometime after 1,600 BC and destroyed the island's largest city. But the true culprit behind the disaster is still a mystery. Some think it could have been an earthquake, while others think a meteorite impact may have caused the wave. Either way, the tsunami wiped out the city of Melos and washed away much of the island's history. Why? The locals weren't deterred. Just a few centuries later, they rebuilt their city on the same spot. And once again, their prosperity attracted the attention of the mighty Roman Empire. By the 1st century AD, Melos was a part of the Roman province of Asia, and the capital of a Roman province at that. It must have been a bustling hub of Mediterranean commerce, so it should come as no surprise that the Romans had grand plans for the island. They wanted to make it look like other major cities throughout their empire, like Athens and Corinth. And to do that, they needed marble. The Romans didn't have any quarries on Melos, so they turned to the neighboring island of Paros. For centuries, ships had sailed from Paros to Melos, delivering marble to the construction projects on the island. And the tradition continued under the Romans. But this isn't the only evidence of maritime activity. Bronze scale was found near the harbor in ancient Melos. It dates back to around 1,400 years ago. It was likely used to weigh cargo being loaded onto ships. There is also a nearby warehouse filled with amphoras, which are clay jars used for storing liquids like olive oil. This was another item in high demand by the Roman Empire, so much so that they established olive oil presses in Melos. Again, it seems that much like the Neolithic islanders, the Romans relied on imports to sustain their way of life. They lacked basic resources, so they sent ships to gather what they needed. In fact, there's even evidence that the Romans imported timber to build their warships in Melos. So even though earthquakes and tsunamis threatened to destroy the island, it remained a hub of maritime activity until the fall of the Roman Empire. So from the Neolithic age to the rise of the Roman Empire, humans lived and worked where modern boats now sail. They traded exotic resins, mined marble, collected timber, and transported important resources. The Greek islands were connected long before roads were paved and ferries ran regularly. Thanks to the sea, these islands were not just separated from each other, but linked. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our other recent episodes. And as always, thanks for watching.